I want to thank everybody for coming out to our December 1st Board of Education workshop meeting. We are going to get things started this evening with our Student of the Month presentation with our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Michael Brooks.
Thank you for coming out, everyone. Obviously, we love doing this each month. It's a wonderful experience to see these kids come out. I want you to pay very particular attention to the adjectives that are used as the teachers speak about these children. It's quite impressive as you hear each one of them described in their attributes. So let's start with the elementary school.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us tonight. Welcome to all of us, and we'd like to introduce at this time our elementary school second grade student of the month, Teresa Odell, and her nominating teachers, Mrs. Barone and Mrs. Roberts.
So when Teresa was chosen for Student of the Month, we read the letter. She actually read the letter to me and was so surprised when she got to the part that said, I am Student of the Month. And right afterwards, we had her kind of tell the class, and the class was able to speak very, very kind words about Teresa. Hardworking, a great friend, always helpful were some of the words used by her classmates. And then Teresa had the chance to come up with what Student of the Month meant to her, so I would like to share that with you right now. Being Student of the Month means I was being good and listening to directions. I was being kind. I was working hard. I was really helpful and nice to others. I always have my hand up when Mrs. Barone or Mrs. Roberts asks a question. Thank you, Mrs. Barone and Mrs. Roberts, for picking me. And we want to thank you for being such a hardworking model student in our classroom every day. So thank you, Teresa. Congratulations.
Let's move right up the line and go to the middle school.
Good evening and thank you. I'll give everyone a moment to get ready in their costumes over here. It is my pleasure to introduce Marlboro Middle School. Sorry to do this, seriously. Marlboro Middle School Student of the Month, Ella LeDuc, and here to present is her sixth grade team of teachers. And I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Keene.
First of all, it's our honor to be here tonight. Greatness is in everyone. Strength is in everyone. There's an entire galaxy of stars out there. And tonight we want to recognize one of those stars. She's on our team, and this is her. Everyone has a favorite action hero or a superhero. Superheroes can be strong, they can make you smile, they can make you laugh. They can be brave, they can be trustworthy, but above all, they are always there to save the day. All these qualities make up the young lady you see standing here tonight, Miss Elizabeth LeDuc, also known as Ella to her teachers. If we spell out the word hero, Ella immediately comes to mind, and she possesses the following qualities. Come right out here, H, helpful to everyone she comes in contact with. E,
gives 110% every day in class, and never complains.
R, respectful to all her peers and teachers, always has a kind thing to say.
O, organized and always one step ahead when you need someone to call on. Robert Clancy once said, "We all have the capacity to be a superhero. In order to become one, you just have to find your unique power or ability and exploit it for the greater good. The cape and the mask are optional accessories, but a kind heart is essential."
Ella, you need no mask tonight. You are living proof every day of what a superhero exhibits. Your kind heart and actions make up the amazing young lady you are.
On behalf of all your teachers tonight, we congratulate you. We also want to recognize your parents tonight. So Mom, Dad, please stand. Grandparents, please stand. Sorry, we got to put you on the spot. We got a superhero in the building. You are Ella's first teachers. You guide her every way, like the galaxy and the stars guide us. You have taught her, you've instilled in her character, strength, kindness, and above all, compassion. And because of this, you have developed a student of the month that we all see standing here beside us tonight.
Ella, you truly are a recipe for academic success, a hero among the stars here at the Marble Middle School. We're all so proud of you. Congratulations.
Don't put this on YouTube.
And just so you know, we don't do this for anyone. Okay? Capes and masks get up.
What do I say? Congratulations on being such an awesome, super role model, not only to your friends, but to your other classmates in the school. So thank you so much.
Oh, there we go. Let's get in. Why don't you put this in? Actually, you should do that.
And certainly not the least, but our last, the high school.
The high school student of the month is Maria Hall. I'm going to ask Maria to come up along with our English teachers this year, Mrs. Casey, and last year, Mrs. Mazzella. Maria is interested in studying political science next year in college. She's a fantastic student, a real pleasure to have in our building, and just really helps our school be the wonderful place that it is. So congratulations, Maria. Mrs. Casey.
The English department is usually asked to pick our student of the month in May. So when I opened our October meeting and said we needed to pick our students, everyone was taken aback. It was very early in the year and we barely knew our students, never mind know somebody who has the criteria for student of the month. As we scrambled through our rosters, Mrs. Mazzella had a very quick answer. She said, Maria Hall, and everyone sat back and smiled. Mrs. Martino was quick to confirm Maria as our choice, saying, when she was a student in my 10th grade honors English class, Maria was always willing to tackle thought-provoking questions that were challenging to answer. Maria flourished in class discussions, especially the ones where the right answer wasn't necessarily the goal. The goal was to think and to probe the question and to discuss her ideas and to allow classmates to influence her thinking. Consequently, Maria became an essential member of Mrs. Martino's class, and she had leadership and positive qualities that set her apart from her peers. Mrs. Martino was right on target with her comments, for these traits have been evidenced in Maria in all of her subsequent years of study. When I responded to Mrs. Mazzella's suggestion, I wasn't quite as articulate as Mrs. Martino when I said, I know why you like Maria Hall, Ricky. She has the mind of a 35-year-old in the body of a high school student, and she does. Maria has a global perspective and humanitarian ideals that are uncanny in a high school student. She does not give credence to typical teenager concerns. Instead, she genuinely cares about the community at large and our world community. In order to pursue her goal of helping others, Maria had to raise money for her overseas travel herself. She did this in myriad ways, most notably through designing and then speaking at church functions about foreign countries and their needs. So far, Maria has traveled to South America several times, not as a tourist, but as a humanitarian who strives to support people in countries that need aid. Her plan is to conquer one continent at a time. During her freshman and sophomore years in college, Maria will conclude her work in South America. Then, during her junior and senior years, she will shift her focus to Africa. And after college, who knows? Maria's compassion for and interest in the world outside of Marlborough is intricately balanced with her academic focus. In class discussions, Maria draws on multiple perspectives, garnering evidence from current events, history, music, literature, and pop culture. Each time she speaks, she drives discussion to a deeper, more perspicacious level. In class sometimes, I feel as if I'm at a tennis match with my head shifting back and forth between Maria and her classmates who relish deep discussion. Maria has participated in our honors track since 9th grade. Not only does her maturity, global perspective, and rich discussion distinguish her, but her attitude towards grades and towards learning set her apart as well. When students are near the top of their class, they are sometimes very eager to continue earning top grades. Not Maria. Grades do not motivate her. Well, you like grades, but you're not motivated by them. Grades do not motivate her. She is driven by a genuine desire to grow, to extend her intellectual boundaries. As a result, she is every teacher's dream. It is with these thoughts in mind that we would like to recommend Maria Hall as the English Department's Student of the Month.
Killer heels, Maria. Yeah, I'm not doing this.
Now, I asked you to pay attention to some of the descriptors for these children, and certainly I did too. Some of the easy ones to pick off: kind, helpful, good friend, strong, humanitarian, intelligent, global perspective. But the ones that really stood out for me: brave, love that, a conqueror of continents. I think that Ann just said she conquers continents, but that's kind of cool too. And certainly superhero. Love it. Families, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, significant others, thank you so much for giving us your kids for a little bit of time. Students, thanks for being you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
I'm going to go off script. Normally, this would be the point where we talk about correspondence and communications. I don't see anything, so I'm assuming there was none on your end for the evening. I actually, sitting here, have a letter that might interest some of the board members. A few meetings ago, we had a big discussion about recess and in the hopes of getting students more recess time. There was a big discussion around asking for help from the state. I have a letter here from Senator Larkin. Dear Mr. Bell, thank you for your correspondence regarding recess in schools. I appreciate you taking the time to contact me and apologize for not responding sooner. I certainly understand the desire to make recess mandatory in New York schools. I too believe that the recess can provide school children with various academic, physical, and social benefits. Please know that I am currently considering legislative action on the issue. Should I decide to introduce legislation mandating recess in New York State schools, I will certainly waste no time contacting you. Thank you again for your correspondence. Sincerely, Bill Larkin. So just as an update on that, some action on the state level, so something that we had requested. So moving forward, we will keep you apprised should Senator Larkin contact us with updates on that matter. With that, we are going to take a brief recess, so anybody with children can leave. We're going to have a presentation on our annual audit, at which point we're going to, I know not necessarily the most exciting presentation, but for us it's a very exciting presentation because we'll be announcing a surplus of $2.3 million from last year. So that is definitely good news, but we can certainly understand anybody not wanting to stick around for that and get their kids home to bed. 2 minutes. Have a good night.
That's why he always says, he takes that, one, two, three, he takes those 2 books and puts them in 6 pages. And this is really the 6 pages. That's exciting.
That's why we have you. At this time, we're going to move on to our presentation for the evening, again with our superintendent, Mr. Michael Brooks.
I'm actually going to pass the baton quickly to Patrick Witherow.
Thank you. We have Ray Pruser, who is our external financial auditor. He's here to do a summary presentation for the board on the annual financial audit. Mr. Pruser, do you want me to pass those out? You pass?
I got it.
You passed?
I got
Okay.
you should have by your seat a summary of the audit report. What I do, that's correct. Instead of me just talking and you try to understand, what I did, took key issues out of the whole 50-some-odd pages and condensed them into 2 pages with some supporting sheets from your audit statement so you can see where the numbers came from. Overall, the district ended with a very positive note, as you mentioned before. They ended with a $2.3 million surplus. It was important to get to that point because, as you know, At the end of 2016, you lost the state aid of over $3 million that you were getting. You needed to build your financial area in order to absorb that during your 16-17 year, which you're in right now. You did it in 3 ways: monitoring your budget with expenditures, establishing what we call reserves, which is rainy days. You set up key reserves that you're going to be able to go forward with to cover the $3 million loss in revenue. The other thing is the excellent job that your business office is doing is monitoring this to make sure it works, and it's being done. As you can see, at the end of the year, you had 3.2, but if you look on the first page I'd like to just to give you an idea, is that if you look at the middle section, which is your balance sheet for the 3 years, what I gave you is a 3-year comparison to show you how you are building up to protect yourself in the 16-17 year. The biggest thing is look at the ratio of assets to liabilities. In 14, you had a 1.18 to 1. What I'm talking about, assets to liabilities, and you can see it grow to a point where you ended 3 to 1 in 16. What you were doing is building to protect the academic side of the school. So you wouldn't cut programs, you could enhance instead of reduce. That was all built in the whole philosophy of what you, as a board, by establishing the reserves, using the reserves, and also watching the budget so the district would not lose. The main purpose of a school is the educational side for your kids. You did that. And you also built it to go forward beside 1 year. You have reserves now that can get you 2 or 3 years down the road so you can stabilize it in order to not miss the $3 million in your budget. You have more reserves to work from. You're working on a budget that's generating enough to carry over to the taxpayers so the tax levies are not going to be higher. So you're building it so everybody wins. The students win by not losing their programs, the enhancements are there, and you're actually working with the taxpayers that they're not overburdened with additional taxes. I commend the board like that. It's easy for the board to give everything back to the taxpayers year after year. But the plan, the way you did to cover because of what happened with you in Dynegy, you did it, okay? And looking at your 16-17 budget, even though you see a 4.3, you actually gave back $4.3 million of all the surpluses that you made, some of the reserves that you used to balance your budget for 16-17. And going forward, 17-18, you're going to be in the same predicament, is that you're going to be okay. And the way Patrick has set it up and the board has set it up, I think you're going to be out 3 or 4 years before you actually see any possibly concerns. By then, you have stabilized it, and what you're going to do systematically reduce one side to offset the loss of revenue on the other side. But you have built a budget for that purpose. You're going to be probably in the future, you're going to start reducing your budget only for the fact that you're at a level where you can do that. And that will offset the loss of that revenue without really going back to the taxpayers. And I commend both the board and Patrick and the business office to do that for you. And what I did here is basically gave you an idea, because a lot of times you don't know what you actually have. You know, when we talk, I laid out the reserves that you have. I laid out the fact that how much you appropriated for taxes, also how much you have left. Right now you have a little bit of 2.8, also of $2.8 million of what they call undesignated. It's a little high. You allow 4%, you have 5%, but here again, it's going to go to offset your shortfall of revenue again for your 17-18 years. So there's a plan for everything that you've done here, which is an excellent, well planned out, well orchestrated for what we call fiscal planning for more than 1 year. Patrick has you out 2 or 3, 4 years out, and how things are going to fall into place so it does not affect the main purpose of a school district, which is the education of students. That's basically a summary of this year. The other thing is I met with the audit committee before here. What's one of the requirements? At 6 o'clock, I sat really more detailed with the audit committee, but if anybody has any questions.
The one thing I want to, that Mike's got to deal with, and the building principals, is not the main audit, but the side audit for our activities and clubs. We don't know all the facts of why, but we have several clubs that finish the years in negatives. We can't spend more than we have, especially when it's the kids and their advisors are involved. Yeah, especially, the one where, $2,300, they spent $2,300 more than they actually had going out of the building. So they're not even there anymore, so they finished the year in a negative, and then at the middle school, and then at the high school, the cheerleaders were like $554 in the negative at the end of the year. So we've got to work with who's ever overseeing, because obviously somebody's got to make that up, because they don't start with a negative when they go to the high school, because it's a different fund. So I'm assuming it's going to come out of the student council fund, Pat? I don't know.
We'll figure that out. We'll get an answer for you.
But yeah, we can't, they should be finishing the middle school with balance to take into the high school to keep working towards their proms and stuff. Definitely not in a negative. And then the other one, none of them are, the drama club's probably the largest one, but they also spend the most. So that's always a big cycle. They need the money to get everything started for the next year. But the two negatives were the only issue in there. So. Good questions. We'll work on it. Thank you.
Patrick is going to be doing an update on our long-term fiscal plan that he's done each of the last couple of years. I think one point that he's probably going to want to speak to himself, rather than me take the wind out of his sail on it, is the net change in fund balance and what was anticipated in his last financial update to this board and what actually happened. So maybe you want to speak to that a little bit, Pat.
Sure, and that Bill kind of took the wind out there earlier. That's right. We did, the last time we had estimated what we were going to finish the year at, we estimated right around 1.7 million, and we actually wound up with 2.3 million, so about $600,000 more than what we had anticipated, which again is we have to attribute that to everybody, all the building principals, everybody sitting here, the board, and the superintendent, in terms of having everybody kind of keep their eye on, are we spending our money wisely? Are we spending money on things that are going to result in the student achievement? And do we know that those are wise expenditures, and are we getting the return? So that's really not anything that I do other than help monitor, but it's in discussions with building and central administrators to have everybody kind of watch their area and just tighten down wherever they can. And that obviously is going to help us. As we've seen in the long-term projections, we do, over the next couple of years, significantly reduce reserves and unappropriated fund balance, but we don't run out of them, which is the important aspect. So having this extra money going into this process is obviously going to be beneficial for us over the long term, because that's going to allow us that much more buffer, and maybe we don't exhaust all of our reserves. We wind up with some, and again, preserving our 4% fund balance through all that. So we will, within the next probably 2 months, have a, as we kick off the budget season, an updated financial presentation and projection multi-year like we've done pretty much every year. But again, that's a very pleasant surprise to wind up with some extra money compared to what we anticipated.
And I think you got to give credit, Pat, because when you're putting all of that together, and I know we talked about it in the meeting earlier, but when you're looking at revenues and what you're planning and what you can, I wish everybody could figure out how, and this is so much larger. You're talking about a $51 million worth of revenue to project and only be off in the end by $2,060. That's pretty good, on a $51 million budget.
Bit of that's luck too. So.
Well, take it when you can get it.
Does the board have any other questions for Ray? Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll take public comment on agenda items for the evening. Please approach the podium, speak into the microphone, state your name and town, and address the Board of Education. Any questions or comments on this evening's agenda? Mark?
I just had a quick question about the reserves, and Patrick, you might have the answer to this. In terms of what you are allowed to keep by law, is there a certain percent that you're allowed to keep, and above that, you're not?
Well, there's not really a set dollar amount other than the unassigned, undesignated reserves or fund balance, which is the law requires 4%
Of the budget?
of the budget. And as Ray said, we're a little bit over 5%, but we've known that we've been over. We anticipated being over. I think we were about 8.7% last year.
Okay.
And the plan is, as we go into the next budget season, by the end of this year, when he gives this report next year, we'll be at our 4%.
Well, so that extra 1%, is the district allowed to keep that? Do they have to turn that back to the taxpayer? I'm just asking.
We're allowed to keep it. I mean, we're technically only supposed to have 4%, but there's no, we could fund additional reserves. The issue is with the other reserves, like you see the insurance reserve, the unemployment insurance, ER, employment retirement contributions, those reserves have to be at a reasonable level. So you see at the 1 year in 2015, that the employee retirement contributions reserves was 3.7 million. That's lowered now to 2.3 million because we feel that's a reasonable reserve to hold. We could have easily put that extra 1% back into that employee retirement contribution, but I honestly would rather be criticized for being over 4% than for having these other reserves be considered unreasonable, because we know why we're over the 4%, because we had to build our position cash-wise to absorb the loss of the emergency aid that we had received in the prior year adjustment.
So the 1 year, the 1% of that's the unfunded one that has that requirement?
That's the unassigned, undesignated, correct. That's typically what we call your fund balance.
Right.
That's the fund balance, correct.
Okay.
So, I mean, we could have, if we really, if we were interested in trying to manipulate the numbers, which we're not, we could have said, look, we don't reduce that employee retirement contribution reserve, but we felt that was a little bit high for what we expected. So we just want the numbers to accurately reflect what our position is.
Okay.
And Pat, if I'm not mistaken, once you put money in a reserve, it has to be used for that purpose.
It does, and we fund that through the budget process. So, when you say, employee retirement contributions, that's ERS reserve. So
Right.
we can appropriate money from that towards our expected expense for ERS.
But that added 1% that we're carrying above and beyond is going to go towards funding next year's.
Oh, yeah, next year
expected shortfall.
next year we'll be at 4%. And this was the long-term plan.
Yeah, so it goes back to the taxpayer, just not.
Absolutely.
Right, not in
right.
the form of a rebate, more of a, we're going to fund some of next year out of what we
Correct.
have
It
this year.
just funds some of the operating expense then that they're not required to fund out of their pocket that year.
You got to remember, Mark, the biggest driver, although a lot of people would see us do the up and downs as time goes on, this is to make it stable, and because we're governed by the tax cap, you have to really work within that. We know we have these deficiencies coming forward, so you have to build up as far as you can when you can. Otherwise, you would wind up decimating program down the road.
Right.
So you have to build, or hitting the taxpayers with all of that. So this gives you that stable balance, although you may be over for a couple of years. If you read like the comptroller's audits, even when they come out about them, when they see people working towards them and working on it, they don't have an issue. It's when they have other people that have them in, well, I think it was a 5-year plan and 7 years and they haven't met it yet.
Right.
Is a difference.
Balance grows every year. Right.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah, and we look for, some people disagree with us, Mr. Walters, but we prefer to see a smoothing effect on the tax rates rather than a type of roller coaster effect where 1 year maybe you get a reduction in your rate, but next year you're paying 10%. We'd rather see a nice smooth effect because we think it's easier for us to plan and obviously easier for taxpayers to plan.
Right. Great, thanks.
Sure, no problem.
Other questions, comments on this evening's agenda? With that, we're going to move on to our superintendent report for the meeting. Mr. Michael Brooks.
Sure, very short. I just want to encourage anybody from our public to come into our buildings in the months of December and January. We've got tremendous concerts, performances, and celebrations all throughout our schools, so please take advantage of coming and listening to the wonderful music that's going to be happening over the next number of weeks. So please join us.
We're going to move on to our personnel recommendation for the evening. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approves the following personnel recommendations as presented. Motion for approval of this evening's personnel recommendations. Jeff, second. Russell, any discussion? Russell?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Moving on to item number 8, contracts. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approves and authorizes the Superintendent of Schools to sign the following agreements between Tetra Tech, Inc., 10 Brown Road, Ithaca, New York, 14850, for the traffic study at the middle school at a cost of $5,000, and Petroleum Traders Vehicle Fuel for an additional year as per RFB-MCSD-01-2016. Motion for approval of contracts. Frank, second. Jeff, discussion? Russell?
Yes.
Jeff? Yes. Susan?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Old business this evening is a second reading of our policy section 4000. Is there any other old business? New business for the evening is our first reading of policy 1330 for appointments and designations by the Board of Education, and policy 1331, the district clerk deputy, first reading. Any other new business for the evening? We'll move on to other items. Any other items for the evening?
Yes.
Susan?
Last meeting, we visited the high school, and it was, to me, an awesome tour and just a great reminder of the facilities that we have and the resources that we have, not only for our students, but for the community. I was curious, I know years ago, when I went to school before the internet was invented, see, like before electric, but before the internet.
2 years ago.
Yeah, right. A part of the curriculum was for all of the schools to visit the planetarium and all of the schools to use, I believe, like a week or a few days of phys ed at the swimming pool. Are we still doing that? And if not, what would it take to get back on that road?
I'm starting to hear rumblings from some of our building people that proposal may be part of some budget packages as we start to move into our creation of budget, actually this month, now that we're in December, for initial presentation to you sometime in February. We can anticipate that may be part of the package. However, it also may be something that the board wants to encourage us to do. So as we start talking about budget parameters come January, February, let's keep that on the front burner.
Okay, great.
Because it's really.
But it's a budgetary item.
It's really busing is the biggest issue, correct?
Busing and staffing too.
Right, and staffing.
Yep. To make sure that we have the time and the,
Ballpark estimate of cost for the next meeting? Just a
for next
ballpark.
meeting?
Next meeting.
Yep, planetary, well, maybe not next meeting, but in January probably. Because we'd have to really frame out what type of a program we want to have, but we'll put something together.
Great, thank you.
And planetarium and the pool.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember going to the pool as a kid and go up there for a week.
And I
It's like
believe.
twice a year.
I believe until we did the cuts, we were doing those.
We're still doing it.
We were
Right.
still doing it. Until we went through the major cuts, we still did those two specific things.
Marie, do you remember the last time we did that?
We slowly dwindled down the programs from like every day or all grade levels to every other grade level, for example, in the pool, or X number of times in the pool for elementary, and same thing with the planetarium. We pulled it back slowly but surely as the budget cuts got tighter.
Okay.
But I agree with Susie. I mean, I heard it, and I was just whispering to Patty that I know the
you know when the last time we went to the planetarium and the pool was?
It's got to be at least 4 or 5 years ago.
I would say, well, counting this year, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Okay.
And
that's all
right. Like maybe 7 now.
Maybe in the short term, we could look into like a community night at the planetarium or an open swim night.
There are a number of those that happen at the planetarium right now for varying groups. There's some groups that come in for that, but.
So I was wondering if it wouldn't be worth just saying we're going to have community night. Anybody that wants to sign up can sign up, just to open it up beyond the standard PTA.
So now, as
Worth a
far as
look.
staffing goes in regards to the pool, is it within the criteria of a phys ed instructor?
Oh, sure,
to-
sure, but
So-
right now they're teaching a full load, so.
So going during, I mean, I obviously it's a little bit more time, but going during like that designated, if you like, well, you can figure it out. I don't need to figure it out.
Well, if you think about it right now, the staff is used full-time
Yeah,
for the program
yeah.
they're currently running, so if we want to bring in groups of students, we either need to cancel the ability of someone else to use the facilities, which
Right.
are high school kids.
Yeah.
Or enhance the staff for that period of time somehow with some extra teaching periods to run the experience during that portion of time.
Of course,
Yeah.
that is.
Correct, right,
It also brings into play like teachers' prep time.
right.
Because you have to do the travel time off, getting off, going in, doing the swimming.
Mhm.
Well, we'll put together a proposal.
Yeah.
So it's the whole morning.
Yep, we'll put something together.
But it's also nice too with the whole recess thing during the winter months. So if, you know, if it's too cold, the kids aren't outside, at least they're getting maybe something a little extra. Not that they all are. on
Recess
one
at the
day.
pool, every day.
I love it.
Hey, listen.
I love it, yes. These, you know, it's actually nice that this is the kind of dialogue again that we're having, that we can start talking about the possibility to do these things again. So we are in the process of pulling that together, and this will absolutely be one of those items that we take a look at.
Right.
Any other items for the evening? At this time, we have the opportunity to recognize district residents and others regarding items that may not have been discussed on the agenda. Please approach the party and speak in the microphone, state your name and town, and address the Board of Education. Anybody with anything for this evening? We do have a proposed executive session for the purpose of reviewing the employment history of a particular person, which may lead to the discipline or removal of that particular person, subject to board approval. Do we expect action? No. We do not expect action. With that, motion to move into executive session. Russell, second. Jeff, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all for coming.